Hello and welcome to Rauta's Indie 5. In this particular episode we obviously review 5 different albums that are kind of a past due with their release date. We started with Italian band called Valgrind. There are a couple of others with the same name basically, but different style. This one is death metal, and so we have here the second full-length album. Curiously enough, Valgrind has been there for almost 25 years by now, yet they have only done a couple of full-length releases, this being their second one, and one EP. The early years were more or less spent with demos and whatnot. Whoever knows what they're doing would wonder that where first 18 years were wasted. I don't know, I don't have the answers, but anyway, here we go. So this one's called Blackest Horizon. Dark title for a dark album. Well, not so dark in a way. This is not black metal or even doom. So this is death metal and kind of a continuation to their previous career, but a little bit changed style this time. Here is the CD layout, so let's take a look at the booklet as I talk. Now, previous album or EP, Seal of Phobos, was more or less melodic death metal in an EP format. And to be honest, it was really mediocre released. That came out in 2017, so not too long time ago. Actually, the band released its debut album only in 2016, so last few years this band has achieved more than the previous 22 years. Curiously enough, the actual level of quality is going up, which is always a good thing. Now, Blackest Horizon is very much old school death metal. Forget those uber melodic things. This is more about early 90s. So basically, the band started in 1994. This is an album that could have come out already back then. Now, the sound is really kind of old schoolish rather than very modern, but not in a bad way. One could even say that this is a nicely done retro death metal album, because everything from the riffs to production is very 1990s, and not in a bad way. There are some melodies and the tempo is shifting between fast and quite slow, and lots of mid-tempo parts as well. So basically everything is there quite well. However, this album, even though the songwriting is a lot better than their previous release, it's still somewhat lacking the magic. The thing that actually separates the mediocre ones from the good ones. Now, this is definitely past mediocre. This is actually quite good and decent album, but still, this is not what I would refer a future classic. Certainly a good album in a retro way, but not in comparison to what could be said about 1990s real death metal classics. So if you are into old school death metal, this is something that you might be willing to give a chance to, but just don't expect this to be the next Entombed or Dismember. Worth listening to, however. The second band of today's Indie 5 is from Finland, and it's called Kuilu, which translates to abyss, ravine, chasm, and so forth. This is their debut album called Monumentti, which then again means monument. So this band was founded a few years ago in Lappeenranta, eastern Finland, close to Russian border, which is also home to other bands such as Horna. This is black metal band, very new in terms of music. That is, a couple of split or mini releases prior to this debut album, and one could say this is so-called third wave black metal. There's very little to do with kind of a second wave Nordic black metal, be it Swedish, Finnish, Norwegian or whatever, because this is more kind of experimental style. One could even say kind of a post-metalish or post-rockish in a way of these songs are structured. Now, these are approximately 10 minutes each, which then again is about 45 minutes in total, which is a little bit too much in my opinion. That is, these songs are not exactly very enjoyable with that length, considering there's so much experimental and kind of let's feel how this goes type of playing. Now, I know there are fans who are totally fine with, 10 minutes and even longer songwriting, compositions and whatnot, especially if one is interested in the so-called Cascadian black metal. This is, however, not nature-oriented, but there are these songs and ideas and parts which kind of remind me of the so-called green metal. However, Kuilu is a little bit kind of undecided whether it should be more into all the wolves in the throne room section, or whether it should be more into like Blood Red Fog and other kind of a modern Finnish kind of black metal. Now, it kind of is feeling, or gives me the feeling it's kind of a left in between of these different styles, and doesn't as such manage to convince me with its quality. There are some better ideas here and there, but given that it's mostly more than 10 minutes each track, that there are no killer riffs or chorus parts or just memorable moments which would make me go wow. So it kind of feels like rather mediocre outcome. Also, the production on this album is quite weak, to be honest. It's too much like 50s, strings music. But what I mean is kind of like kind of surf music, where there's not that much distortion. Then again, not much power either. It's kind of like as if you have this kind of a effects pedal and it's low on battery, and the sound is kind of getting crappy because of that all. And that's what in my opinion, feels like it's a bit problematic with the sound here. Also, the kind of a screamy vocals are something that sounds to me like placeholder vocals. They don't have passion, anger, hate, energy. They're just weak and kind of very easy to forget. One of the lamest screamy vocals in my opinion for a long time. Not totally useless, but not very good either. But be reminded, this is their debut album, so who knows where the band will grow in the years to come. That's about Kuilu. Not very strong album, only for fans of this selected subgenre. The third album then again comes all the way from Italy, and it's of doom/death metal. This one is called Assumption, and the album is called Absconditus. 3 songs and 37 minutes. Sounds a little bit like that Kuilu, but in a different genre. 2 15-minute songs and 1 6-minute track in the middle. Not so atypical for a doom death band, but to be honest, also a band, or at least a release, which just falls into the pit of creating way too lengthy songs for its own good, because once again, the lack of killer material is very obvious here. So unless you're one of those who is very much into enjoying lengthy tracks with songs basically going nowhere, it's all about atmosphere and you don't get that much about riffs or melodies, or I don't know, you just care about how things are kind of flowing, not so much about grooving. Well, maybe then this is your cup of tea. But I would like to say that even though the genre is quite different here with Assumption, the same problems are very much here. Lengthy songs, kind of a weak production, growling vocals are quite okay, but it seems like this is the type of material which is kind of easy and kind of nice to jam with your friends at your rehearsal room. I know, I've been there. Sometimes you just, start jamming with your guitar and the drummer goes along and bass player is also banging his head back and forth, and you're like, yeah, this sounds so cool, and suddenly you feel like you've been playing like 12 minutes of just some random stuff. No real structures, no good riffs, maybe, but at least you get the flow going. Everybody's good having a couple of beers and whatnot, and you're just giving high fives and like, yeah, we have good stuff. But the difference between this kind of a jamming session and actually recording good tracks is like huge. And as such, I feel like Assumption is more about kind of jamming debut rather than a album full of, you know, good riffs and songs. I don't know if it would make a difference that much, to be honest, if these 15 minutes tracks would be split into three different tracks and then put together, because the bottom line here is that there are no really good riffs. It's all about creating this atmosphere, then adding some growling vocals and whatnot. Sometimes it's more about deathish, sometimes it's more about doomish, but still it has this kind of a almost post-metal stuff, but not having the kind of a technicality and sort of out of boundaries, breaking the rules, kicking down the fences mentality. So while it's all about kind of a jammy feeling, then again it's still trying to do doom death, and to be honest, not that well. Very mediocre release in my opinion, only for the fans of this given sub-genre. The fourth band of this Indie 5 is not exactly a metal, but metalish rock and roll anyway, if you wanna split hair and all that stuff. If you have ever been into bands like Motörhead, and especially Motörhead, then this one is definitely for you. It's called Poison Whiskey, almost the same way as the Lynyrd Skynyrd song, except without the lack of E there. Now, what makes this so close or related to metal music is in the fact that three of these guys, the whole lineup that is, are more or less related to metal. As you can see, there's, like, for example, Mike Valanne in the middle, who is known for Faf Bay and the Black League, and also Taneli Jarva, who is mostly famous for his career in Sentenced, but also in Impel Nazarene and the Black League. So Poison Whiskey are these guys kind of a comeback to rock and roll if they never were out of that in the first place. Very simple in design, just a tracklist and a cover, and inside some boozing and a kind of logo or symbol of sorts. So no lyrics, but you can figure it out by yourself. Poison Whiskey is all about being kind of a homage to Motörhead with some punk influences as well. It's more just, you know, kind of a greasy tobacco and alcohol infused rock and roll than just pure metal, not to mention punk. But it's kind of a metallic at the same time, given the sound of the, you know, music and the kind of a Lenny Kilmister kind of vocals and all that stuff. Really good if you compare it to any band that even tries to do something akin to a Motörhead style. Maybe not the most metallic album of the year, but who gives a damn? Good album is a good album, and if there's a little rock and roll with it, I don't mind, Joe. So check Poison Whiskey, one of the better albums to come the last spring. Now the last and the fifth one comes from Greece. It's a little bit different than the other bands, but metal music nevertheless. This is Alphastate from Athens. Kind of a new band with its second album called The Grind. Now this album cover is a little bit peculiar. I can show it to you because take a look. It's clearly that there's some photoshopping skills to this kind of a gas mask nude people, but where are their genitals? I don't know if this is more of a statement or just, you know, kind of a censorship. Be it as it may, it looks kind of a stupid. At the same time, it's kind of a great quality art. Background is basically, you know, all the information, and inside we have lyrics and all that stuff. Now, Alphastate's music is very kind of a typical, very traditional heavy metal music. It's kind of a melodic, it's kind of a happy, it's not too joyful or too sugar-coated or anything like that, but it's just, you know, one of those bands that isn't exactly dark, yet at the same time it's not too power metal-y happy kind of a stuff. And that might be exactly one of the problems with this album. It's kind of a monotonous, a monotone is it, I think it's the correct way to put it. The thing is that while all the elements of kind of a basic heavy metal is all there, it's just something that is way too general for its own good. I mean, it's like, yeah, you have done all by the book. sitting on your school bench and all that stuff, writing notes down how to create a heavy metal album and all that stuff. Now, for example, the production is just great. It's powerful, it's kind of a clean but not too clean, and you know, all the instruments just play fantastic. Vocalist, in my opinion, then again, is clearly skilled, but in some ways a little bit annoying with its almost power metalist way of you know, to go with the vocals, you know, lyrics and all that stuff. But that could be forgiven. The real problem is not with vocals, it's exactly with them songs, which are just way too bland, it's way too grey. It's just like, this is the kind of music where you should, I don't know, go over the borders, do something that is original and different from other bands. Just creating just some basic background heavy metal is not gonna cut it, not with so many good bands out there. I mean, it's just like, if you can't beat Manowar, Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, or even get close to that kind of a level where basic, just good solid basic riffs just work and have cool killer chorus parts, I mean, kind of like, why bother? Because after all, you have to have some grooviness, some hooks where you just get the audience in. This is just something that is way too easily forgotten right away as soon as you eject the disc and it's all gone. So Alphastate, really mediocre release, and that's all I can basically say about it. So here are yet another 5 albums for our indie batch, indie 5 batch that is, and I hope you find something interesting in this album. As always, your comments more than welcome. Should you have any questions, do that on the comments box below. See you soon with more Rauta stuff coming your way. Cheers!